As the Browns search for their next head coach intensifies, competition for this year's top candidates is heating up across the league. Meanwhile, Chargers defensive coordinator Jesse Minter and the Browns have mutually agreed to cancel his second interview. Also, NFL insider Jordan Schultz reports that Grant Udinski and Nathan Scheelhaase have emerged as Cleveland's current frontrunners. Let's break it all down right here on the Daily Dawgs. Hi again, everybody, and welcome into the Daily Dawgs show here on the Big Play Sports Network presented by FanDuel. I'm Ryan Tyler, joined as always by Browns on SI insider as well as host of the Big Play Cleveland show here on the Big Play Sports Network, Nick Pannone. Nick, good afternoon. Usually been doing the show a little bit earlier, but honestly, Nick, it's kind of a good thing that we delayed it a little bit to do it this afternoon because we were going to start with a different headline, but then breaking news at this time of year is pretty common, and we got the news, Nick, that the Browns head coach search, well, you could scratch another name off that list, not because he has another job quite yet, but for a different reason. Nick, we found out just a little bit ago, defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Chargers, Jesse Minter, who had a second interview scheduled here in Berea, actually was supposed to happen today. Well, the team and Minter have mutually agreed to cancel that interview. The reports out there are that Jesse Minter believes he is going to be a head coach elsewhere, at least has a greater chance to be in. I believe, Nick, one of those places where he is a front runner is here in the AFC North, the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, it feels like he's going to Baltimore. And it always felt weird that the Browns were going to do their second interview with Minter after the Ravens, where he's got such strong ties to Baltimore. You know, like, look, for the second time this week and for the second day in a row, you have a candidate pull out of the second round of interviews that feels noteworthy. But it's really not. Like, was Jesse Minter really a serious candidate for this thing? I would say no. I get that the phrasing that's out there from the reporting from Mary Kay Cabot said that this is a mutual thing. I don't know how mutual it is. I think Minter probably ends up in Baltimore. I think he probably wound up with yesterday's interview with the Ravens, feeling like he was going to be their next head coach. And if you're mad about this, it's like, why? Because we know that the Browns are probably going to hire one of these two young offensive-minded coordinators in either Grant Udinski or Nathan Scheelhaase. And if they go defensive minded guy, it's going to be Jim Schwartz, who was been in the building for 3 years and has the support of the players. So the fit with Jesse Minter always felt a little bit strange. And I certainly don't think that there's any reason to panic or be outraged that another interview got canceled. Like, yeah, the Browns are having a little bit of a difficult time. We knew they were going to. We knew this head coaching opening wasn't as attractive as some people would have wanted it to be because of the lack of a quarterback. But Jesse Minter would be the runner-up to Jim Schwartz in this thing anyway. So I think everybody's kind of losing their minds a little premature about Jesse Minter. I don't think this is the end of the world at all.
Nick, let me know if you disagree or have something to add here, but it does seem at this point in time we're really down to just 4 candidates. And obviously we'll get to the Rooney Rule because the Browns couldn't hire a head coach right now if they wanted to because of that. But the names that stand right now, sans Jesse Minter, as we got the news, he canceled his second interview, are, of course, Jim Schwartz, the internal promotion here in Cleveland. It's Todd Monken, former Ravens offensive coordinator. And then the 2 young bucks in Grant Udinski, and then Nathan Scheelhaase is gaining steam to be one of the Browns' front runners. Nick, let's talk about this Rooney Rule, because the Browns right now, even if they wanted to hire a head coach, and they have an interview scheduled, I believe it is Friday with Grant Udinski, and next week sometime, we don't know, with Nate Scheelhaase. Even if they wanted to hire one of these guys, they couldn't. Nick, can you explain that Rooney Rule and the timeline the Browns are kind of on at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing that I'll do before explaining the Rooney Rule and the timeline and things of that nature, again, I'm not worried about the Jesse Minter thing. Start to get worried if either Udinski or Scheelhaase pull out of their second interview. Like, that's where you really can start to get a little bit nervous about the way that this thing is materializing. And honestly, I think Browns fans that are fed up with just the timeline in general have the right to be, because you just said it, Ryan. You're going to interview Grant Udinski, who I believe is the front runner for this Cleveland Browns head coaching job, tomorrow on Friday. Here's the issue. If that's your front runner, you cannot hire him because of the Rooney Rule, which states that you need to have 2 formal in-person interviews with minority candidates or women for this head coaching vacancy, and the Browns to date have 0. They'll hope to have their first in Nathan Scheelhaase at some point early next week. It'll probably be Monday at the absolute earliest, if not Tuesday, for Scheelhaase, and then you can't even hire him because you need to add one more person to this mix. Now, Udinski is fascinating because he'll interview with the Buffalo Bills on Sunday. So as long as everything goes according to plan and as long as he shows up, which has been a little bit difficult for the Browns to get at least over the last 2 days, he'll interview in Berea for the Browns head coaching job. He cannot get hired. At least we don't think so, because the Browns have not met with two minority in-person candidates that are external. You can't bring in a Deuce Staley. You can't bring in the Banda, the safety coach. You have to get an external candidate to fulfill the Rooney Rule. And then they'll meet with Scheelhaase early next week. And then they'll still have to add another candidate to the mix. So my recommendation here would be for Andrew Berry, hey, you kind of unfortunately had Wednesday and Thursday off because your interviews got canceled. Like, I would probably try to find somebody to come in to interview on Saturday or Sunday, not because I'm trying to rush this process along, but because if Udinski is my guy, I want to make sure that that's communicated to him and he knows going into the Buffalo interview on Sunday that I've got an offer in my back pocket. And if Buffalo's interest isn't sincere, he could do to the Bills what McDaniel and Minter have done to the Browns and back out of that interview to come be the next head coach and the youngest head coach in football history if he were to be hired here in Cleveland.
Well, Nick, let's talk about Grant Udinski. Obviously, the Cleveland Browns were initially the only team to request Udinski for an interview for the head coach position. And now I believe, as you mentioned, the Buffalo Bills are that second team. They requested to interview him for the head coach job on Wednesday. It came out, as you mentioned, from Adam Schefter. He'll be interviewing for that position on Sunday. They mentioned Brian Dable in Buffalo as a name to watch. Offensive coordinator Joe Brady, an internal promotion there, is a name to watch. Nick, you're right. The Browns got to act quick, because if you're Grant Udinski and you're not certain that that Cleveland Browns head coach job is waiting for you, and then you go into Sunday and you like what you hear from the Buffalo Bills, you think you got a chance there, well, why take the job in Cleveland if you're going to get a head coach job and you have the opportunity to coach one Josh Allen?
And then that kind of puts all the pressure back on the Browns to really make something work with Scheelhaase, who's technically third in command to Sean McVay. I think that's the big thing that gets left out of the conversation with him is he's the passing game coordinator. Like, above him, you still have the offensive coordinator that doesn't call the plays there in Los Angeles, and then ultimately McVay. So I think if you're Nathan Scheelhaase and you're a younger guy that has been a little bit unproven in the league, like, look up Nathan Scheelhaase resume next to Tommy Rees. Honestly, Tommy Rees has probably a little bit more going for him in terms of bona fide NFL experience and play calling experience and just time on task than Nathan Scheelhaase does. So I definitely think that the Browns have to get serious about this. Again, I don't think Minter today was serious. It's a defensive minded head coach that runs a completely opposite scheme than what Myles Garrett thrives in. Like, if you hired Jesse Minter, you're probably running a 3-4 defense, or you're hiring Jesse Minter and trying to keep Jim Schwartz. Like, none of that would have made any sense to me. Todd Monken still doesn't make any sense. Like, now that Minter is in the rearview mirror, McDaniel is in the rearview mirror, it's probably time to get serious about the two young kids that you actually are interested in Udinski and Scheelhaase, but you want to get this other Rooney Rule interview scheduled, handled, and also in the rearview mirror, so you could proceed with hiring one of these candidates. I think the last thing that you want to do is rush a hire. I get that there's really no rush here because there's not too much interest in either Udinski or Scheelhaase, but these guys are getting head coach looks elsewhere, and you don't want to be the last person stuck holding the bag, so to speak.
It really makes you think about the Browns potentially. Did they miscalculate this whole interviewing process because of this Rooney Rule, Nick? Like you mentioned, Jesse Minter, that went by the wayside. But even if he had interviewed here in Cleveland like he was scheduled to, he's white. He's not a minority. It doesn't fulfill one of the two external minority candidates that you have to interview. And then when we look at the four names, as I've previously mentioned, Schwartz, Monken, Grant Udinski, and Nathan Scheelhaase. Nathan Scheelhaase obviously qualifies for that, but he's not going to be able to interview until next week. We all know he's still in the playoffs with the Rams, and then if they go to the Super Bowl, you're not even allowed to make that hire, if I'm not mistaken, Nick, until after the Super Bowl.
You're correct. So I want to throw two things out about Scheelhaase. One is that you can meet with him next week in person, but you can't hire him if the Rams win on this weekend and move on to the Super Bowl. And the second piece is, even if they want to hire Scheelhaase, because this has been misreported and misunderstood, and people have this all backwards, even if Scheelhaase is their guy, they still need to meet with one more minority candidate. Like, just hiring Scheelhaase because he's a minority, that doesn't fulfill the Rooney Rule. So they're going to have to add somebody else to the mix, and I'm kind of confused as to what the holdup on that is, because they had all day Wednesday with no interview when McDaniel canceled, and now all day today on Thursday with no Jesse Minter. So again, yeah, I try to sort through the logistics of this as quickly as possible, because we mentioned Buffalo. If that's what we're up against for Udinski, Ryan, they're moving. They've got two in-person minority candidates. They could make a hire, and they just fired McDermott on Monday, so they're further along in their process by logistics than the Browns are. So you want to get that sorted out sooner than later. I kind of can't emphasize that part of the process enough.
Well, there's certainly going to be another name, Nick, that you mentioned is going to be having to come into this equation because of that Rooney Rule. And it's just insane to think about. We're talking about head coaches that are potentially going to be in Browns uniform, or I should say brown and orange polo, whatever they decide to wear, a visor for heck, Doug Peterson with it. We don't even know if they're going to be able to be hired yet because of this, but let's talk about these front runners. According to NFL insider Jordan Schultz, Nick, it might be the young guys that are going to get their chance. He names Nathan Scheelhaase, of course, pass game coordinator for the Rams, and Grant Udinski, who we've talked about ad nauseum, current offensive coordinator for the Jacksonville Jaguars, as two front runners for this Cleveland Browns head coach position. Jordan Schultz noted both of these candidates had excellent virtual interviews with the Browns. He also did touch that the Browns coaching search is still fluid, but he said there's a good chance, Nick, there will be, more names added as finalists. But it seems like Grant Udinski and Nathan Scheelhaase specifically in this last couple of days have really been gaining steam.
Yeah, obviously Jordan Schultz is really good. Obviously he's a friend of Big Play. We've had him on a bunch. His reporting is to be trusted. I think right now, there that could make a lot of Browns fans cringe. That I don't know that they're serious about Jim Schwartz as an actual head coaching candidate. I think their dream scenario that they're still trying to get set up is to pair Jim Schwartz with one of these two young offensive minds. And this report comes out from Jordan Schultz. The timing of it was hilarious. That it's either going to be Udinski or Scheelhaase. And then you see some of the reporting from Mike Florio at Pro Football Talk and others that, well, there's no guarantee that Jim Schwartz would want to hang around to just be a coordinator and to work for somebody in their 30s. He might want to, go somewhere else. And you look at some of the teams that are out there that now will need a defensive coordinator. The 49ers, how would he like to coach that wide nine with Nick Bosa? Like, there would be fits, but Ryan, he's under contract with the Browns. So that's the other pieces. They've got to figure that out. So if I'm making the recommendation, I think Schultz's reporting is accurate. I think that's also the most logical and best path forward to try to bring some young offensive ideas and innovation to this offense to get this thing fixed once and for all. You hire either Udinski or Scheelhaase, and you give Schwartz that promotion in both title and salary. Hey, you can be one of the highest paid defensive coordinators in the history of the sport. You're going to have that associate head coach, assistant head coach label that if something were to go awry, it would be your job. But I guess you got to also weigh the fact that this is the third time that Schwartz has interviewed for the Browns head coaching job. And if he doesn't get it, he might just throw his hands up in the air and say, what else do I have to do? I turned Myles Garrett, your guy's best player, into from a really good perennial all pro to a first ballot, no doubt Hall of Famer. So I think this is going to be very fluid. And ultimately, again, they're going to have to add another candidate to this list before they could make a decision. So this is one of the most bizarre coaching searches that's gone on out there in the NFL right now, truly.
Nick, we talked about, I understand why the Cleveland Browns felt the need to move on from Kevin Stefanski, whether you agree with the move or not, but it seems like they couldn't have chosen a worse year or a more tumultuous year. Like last year, you had very highly touted candidates. Ben Johnson, we all know, was a poster child of that class. The Ravens, we just talked about Jesse Minter possibly being the front runner to become the head coach there with him canceling his interview here in Cleveland. Well, another team, Nick, that needs a head coach, that's the Pittsburgh Steelers, just staying here in the AFC North. And we talked about Nate Scheelhaase. He's gaining steam there in Pittsburgh. Nick, this was a great quote that you put in your article. According to longtime Pittsburgh sports reporter Gary Dulac, he said the Steelers had a tremendous meeting with Scheelhaase. Nick, this is quite the quote. Dulac said he put out a Mike Tomlin vibe. A Mike Tomlin vibe, that is quite the compliment there for Scheelhaase. And Nick, it all comes back to getting this process done sooner than later, because similar to the Baltimore Ravens, a lot of people view Pittsburgh as a more attractive job here in Cleveland.
Yeah, which that one is a bit confusing. I get just because of the ownership and stability and the fact that they're hiring their fourth head coach since the 60s, and the Browns are hiring their 20 something head coach in that same time frame. Pittsburgh would be a bit more attractive. But when you're looking at the quarterback thing, Pittsburgh is in the same situation, if not a worse situation than the Browns, because how are they ever going to get a top draft pick in order to solve that and to get off this, merry-go-round of quarterbacks recycled through Pittsburgh and Yinzerland? I will say it seems like Mike McCarthy is going to be the fit there. He's from there. I think that's ultimately the route they decide to go down. But if they want to go young, if they want to go innovative, if they want to change up the way that they've been doing things, Dulek has been covering the Steelers for a very long time for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. He is one of the, true last, him and Mary Kay Cabot, honestly, some of the two, last long withstanding team beat reporters here in the Rust Belt. Like, he's plugged in. And if he's saying that Scheelhaase gave off a Tomlin vibe, if that's true, I mean, that could be attractive to Steeler ownership, as Mike Tomlin gave them a lot of years. And, ownership there confessed that they were surprised that Mike decided to step away, even though they knew that it was a possibility. They were surprised that he decided to go through with it. So, yeah, if Scheelhaase is like seriously in play in Pittsburgh, again, that's where you've got to be a little bit careful about how you're handling this process if you're the Browns, because you're banking on meeting with him next week for your second in person Rooney Rule. And I'm sure the Pittsburgh's going to try to interview him in person next week as well. So this is all really nuts. And the timeline and the guys that they actually do bring in are very noteworthy. And the fact that the only two guys that they've brought in to date are Jim Schwartz, who's been in the building for 3 years, and Todd Monken, who I don't think anybody realistically views as a head coach in the National Football League. Like, that ain't good. It's not good.
Nick, Jordan Schultz talking about the Browns, he said, quote, "This is a team that could target a coach that is a year away if they truly believe that coach is a future star." Obviously, in that sentence, he's talking about a younger guy, an upcoming offensive mind in Grant Udinski or Nathan Scheelhaase. I know we've talked about it at length, Nick. You're saying you truly believe the Browns aren't that far away, and I think just in the last 5 years or so, we've gotten an NFL blueprint that if you have a head coach and you have a quarterback, a quick turnaround is certainly possible. Well, Browns right now have neither. Could they get one here shortly? We sure hope so. That's, of course, in the head coach. If you're the Cleveland Browns, is that the message you're sending to these guys like Grant Udinski and Nathan Scheelhaase? And then also, Nick, if one of these do become the head coach, well, maybe you are losing Jim Schwartz, because I'd imagine, like you said, he would probably be tired going through this process just to stay in a lateral position at DC. And if that is the case, you lose Jim Schwartz. Are the Browns really that close still?
I think the Browns are close, man. Like, you could find defensive coordinators. Dennis Allen was an awful head coach. He completely wasted multiple years with the New Orleans Saints, and he gets hired as a defensive coordinator, and he's like right back into his element. Like, you can find defensive coordinators that are out there. If Jim wants to play hardball, you could find somebody that would sign up to coach Myles Garrett, who's going to give you multi-sack games multiple times throughout the season. Like, you could find somebody to coach a secondary that's led by Denzel Ward, where opposing quarterbacks won't even throw the football in their direction. So I think that's how the Browns have to approach this thing. And I maintain that they're close. And because if you hire either Udinski or Scheelhaase, you're pretty much signaling to the team, to the organization, to the fan base, all the above, what we all know. Hey, we're a year and a half away. And if we're going to hire somebody that's 30 years old without a true answer at quarterback, and maybe Shador Sanders, or what, while there's a little bit of promise there, and Deshaun Watson as a retread, Dylan Gabriel exists for whatever reason, like, you could try to squeeze that orange one last time. And then maybe for once, the football gods will smile down on the city of Cleveland in the 2027 NFL draft and grace them with a quarterback, since it seems like there will be more names that come out in 2027. Obviously, there's a long way to go to get there, but I think, like, if you get this hire right and you hire somebody that could bring some innovation to this offense, all the defensive cornerstones are under contract. You could contend in a year and a half. A year and a half is the timeline to be in the playoff mix for this football team, because then Myles Garrett's just 31. Denzel Ward is just then 30 years old. Your defense is a bit older, but then you got your young quarterback, and you're ready to compete with that young quarterback on his rookie contract with this new young head coach and his innovation with young players like Quinshon Judkins, Harold Fannin Jr. already in place. You've got 2 draft picks this year to help bolster that offensive line and wide receiver position group. I'm not as down and out about this, even if you do lose Jim Schwartz, because you've got options for once, and options are a good thing to have in this league.
Nick, last question for you, and I'm curious your answer. I kind of got my thoughts as well. One, do you think the Browns have mismanaged this head coaching search thus far? And then also, are you shocked? Because we've had 4 head coach vacancies get filled already. Harbaugh to the Giants, Stefanski to the Falcons, Jeff Hafley, the new Miami coach, and then Robert Saleh to the Titans. Obviously, there's still other teams like the Raiders looking for their head coach. Are we shocked the Browns haven't named their head coach yet? And again, they can't yet because of the Rooney Rule. But at some point, this rubber's got to hit the road. Or are you happy they're waiting out for the right guy?
So this is such a cop-out answer from me, and I'm sorry. I think they've mismanaged the process by the fact that they can't hire somebody today even if they wanted to. I think that's mismanagement. However, in terms of the candidates that they're meeting with and the candidates that we're hearing that they're actually interested in Udinski and Scheelhaase, I think that's good. And I know that that's going to scare some people because these guys are young. They are unproven. There's no guarantee that they are going to work out. But the thing is, the Browns have tried everything else, haven't they? Like, Hugh Jackson was the hot hire. Freddie Kitchens was the internal promotion that popped. The last time that they did this, they went with the guy that not a lot of people knew the name of, Kevin Stefanski. And whether you like it or hate it, or like Stefanski or hated Stefanski, he at least made it 6 years. And he put 2 Coach of the Year awards on the mantle, and he took this team into the playoffs 2 times. Now, that voice was lost this year, certainly, and the ownership group came out and said that they thought this roster was too talented to just win 5 games. So there needed to be a change made, and there ultimately was. But I think they're doing the right thing. I think you're wasting your time in the way that the NFL is currently set up if you're not chasing one of the young, innovative offensive minds to lead your organization forward. Because if you're not, and you're going to go with somebody like Jim Schwartz with a young offensive coordinator, well, then that guy's just going to get hired, and you're effectively the Detroit Lions this year, where Dan Campbell was pretty much left by himself calling the defensive plays, calling the offensive plays, because both of his coordinators got hired, and the 2 guys that they hired to replace those 2 coordinators just were not as good. So I think if we're trying to build this up in a sustainable way, it should be Udinski or it should be Scheelhaase.
Dominoes are starting to fall, Nick. We just hope our Cleveland Browns sooner than later name their head coach, but not yet. We'll be here to cover it when they do. For Nick Padone, I'm Ryan Tyler. Appreciate everybody tuning in here to the Daily Dawgs on the Big Play Sports Network. We'll catch you tomorrow.